Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and once again, I am bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, legendary drummer, wrapping up the drummer weekend that we're doing over here on Turned Out a Punk, Stephen Perkins from the band Jane's Addiction, but also like on, we talk about this in the show, like on so many incredible records, including Mike Watt, Ballhog, or Tugboat, one of my favorite records of all time. More on that in one second. But first, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother, who is the show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, Tristan Abraham, and he will get the message to me. Thank you, Tristan, for all the hard work you do for us here at the show. I love you, buddy. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at LeftForDamian. If you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is just by telling people you know about it, just letting everyone know that there's this podcast where they just, talk about music, punk, generally punk. You can also support the show by heading over to where you subscribe to this thing, normally iTunes, and rating it. And thank you to everyone that does do that. I really do appreciate it. You can also support it by heading over to patreon.com/turnedoutapunk and support it by seeing what we do over there. There's some footnotes and some other things over there, lost episodes, etc., etc., etc. Speaking of support, this thing would not be possible to find folks, fans who came forward a few years ago and said, Damian, do what you do. Just don't do it out of your own pocket. And they helped me cover the cost of doing this thing. And I really appreciate it because it does cost money to do this thing. Surprise, surprise, for a free podcast. All right. Also, the band I play in, Fucked Up, will be coming to maybe your town. We're going to be coming out on tour with Faith No More, and it's going to be pretty exciting. I'm very excited for that. And then we're going to be going out in January for kind of a David Comes to Life 10th anniversary tour. So check fuckedup.cc for more information about that. Also, Matador Records is going to be reissuing David Comes to Life, so you can find that record over there at Matador Records. And our buddy Scotty Karate is putting out Fucked Up's 90-minute long Year of the Horse. I'm really stoked about this record. I'm really, really proud that I got to be involved with this thing, and I'm very excited to hear it on vinyl. And you can hear it too by heading over to tankcrimesrecords.com and checking it out there. All right, on to today's show. Today on the show, Stephen Perkins is here from the band Jane's Addiction. Now, when Stephen wanted to come on the show, I was very excited, and he is definitely very passionate about his connection to punk. It speaks to the fact that this music had ripples and massive ripples, in terms of the impact that Jane's Addiction would have. So, I'm very excited for you to hear this. Stephen plays on tons of records and is doing music constantly. Most recently, he played on the Gilby Clarke record, Gospel Truth, and Jane's Addiction will be playing some shows this September as well in different parts of the United States. So you can check your local listings for that. Actually, I can tell you, Redondo Beach, Louisville, Kentucky, and Camden, New Jersey at some festivals in these places. So check your local listings for those places, if you're in those places, I guess. This is fun. This is amazing. We didn't even get a chance to really dig into the Porno For Pyros records, which I think those things are awesome. Anyway, we will talk about that in spoiler part 2. For now, sit back, relax, enjoy Stephen Perkins on Turned Out a Punk. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on this show.
It's a pleasure to be on the show, and being on the show means talking about music, punk rock especially, and the roots of all glorious art.
Well, and as I was just telling you off air, obviously, like everyone in this world, I'm a massive fan of all these different projects you've been involved with. But I think specifically with Jane's Addiction, it's such a pivotal band for bridging the two worlds we kind of talk about obsessively on this show, which is that first punk explosion, and then you guys really usher in that second punk explosion in the early 90s.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So the timeline is just a beautiful memory for me because I'll be 54 in September. So 1985, me and Navarro already had a metal band that played the Troubadour, the Roxy, the Whiskey, all through the early 80s. We were only 14 or 15, but we noticed if you put up flyers on the strip, you go do gigs, you earn it. And you might not be great or you might be. It doesn't really matter. It's about going out and doing it yourself. And we noticed musicians and we saw maybe the quality of the caliber. And sometimes it was about attitude, sometimes it was about technique, and sometimes you had both in the band. But the strip was really ending, and everybody who had a band was getting gobbled up by Geffen and Capitol and Warner Brothers and all these major labels.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite a bore and it was pasty, but there was a couple of hot shots and there were some great musicians, of course. But late night was this punk rock scene that had Fishbone and the Chili Peppers and X and the Minutemen that turned into Firehose and a handful of cool bands, TSOL. And of course, prior to that, you had the Circle Jerks and Black Flag and Fear. And then it's incredible late night after hours gutsy, artsy, reflection of the late night LA scene was going right into the music. It was different than the strip. So anyhow, me and Navarro were just 15, 16. And my girlfriend at the time, her older brother was the bass player with Perry in a band called Psycom. And Psycom was deathly dark and, dripping with gothic molasses.
A really great band, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But they wanted to do something with a little more sense of humor. And what was going on in LA with Fishbone and Chili Peppers and even in my Minutemen, Firehose, there was this funk. There was this upbeat funk. It was major. It wasn't minor music in a sense. A lot of major chords. It was up. So they were getting this infused, funky, late night. Let's hop around with the Chili Peppers. I think Vitamin, and it was in them. So then it became this urge to do a lot of songs like Had a Dad, Idiot's Rule, Pigs and Zen, still infused with that funk and somewhat kind of like a tongue-in-cheek sense of humor with the lyrics and the poems. It wasn't until a little later we started embracing Then She Did and Ted and 3 Days and telling our own story separate. But so what you saw at the end of the night at the strip, they would go downtown. And what you saw downtown from midnight to 6 a.m. was this other scene. So you would have everybody mingle together. It wasn't rare to see Anthony and Flea. And then here comes the cats from, Motley or Faster Pussycat or GNR. There was these different camps, but we all hung out and we were looking for something to do late night. And who became the band was Jane's Addiction, was the house band for these parties at the Scream. And me and Navarro still infatuated with hotshot eventful musicianship, Iron Maiden, maybe some early thrash metal with Metallica or even Slayer or Venom, and showing off our chops, like of course anything that you would get out of Deep Purple or Zeppelin. And then Perry and Eric were obsessed with Bauhaus and Joy Division and just coming out of Psycom and Echo and Susie and they didn't have huge musical events. They just had these great stories and cinematic music. So there was this marriage of Perry and Eric, who had 8-10 years on me and Navarro, and me and Navarro still obsessed with showing off a little. And that's kind of what was happening in LA. The post-punk thing and the metal thing was coming to an end. There needed to be a fusion. And me and Dave and Perry and Eric were at this moment of fusion and these great late night parties that everyone was attending. It turned into people at those parties turned into Tool and Rage and No Doubt and other bands from LA that were, Ozone Motley, some great bands that came out of the shows that we were playing. They were the young, me and Navarro were damn young, but they were, the younger generation that were there to watch it happen and turn into something else. But I really think that our first and our live record at at the Roxy, we played only once on the strip. That was the Roxy. We had a gig at the Troubadour, but it got canceled on us because we did some funny advertising where you pay to play at the Troubadour because you had to rent the lights and rent the sound and rent the backstage. or you just didn't get it. You played without it. So it was like you pay to play. So
Yeah.
so we put that on the flyer. They canceled us, but we only played once on the Strip. And that was our recording at the Roxy, our first live record, our only live record until later. But at that moment, you know, we brought in a mobile unit, which was unheard of at the time. And it was an RV equipped with recording gear. We parked it between the Rainbow and the Roxy and did an hour acoustic set and a 2-hour electric set and made our own live record, and didn't have the need for what everything was going on in the Strip to get gobbled up by a label, you know, basically a major that would put you in this cookie cutter machine, and they have a photographer and a stylist and a producer and a marketing team, and you become everything else that's coming out of LA. It was just nothing. There was nothing, no substance.
Yeah.
So we did this, our own record, before we went to Warner's, and we had better offers from Capitol and Geffen as far as the numbers concerned, the number of the money. But Warner's gave us full freedom for artwork, lyrical styling of the images of the band. Never had anything to do with us. They just wanted to show the world this broken late night band that's separate of the Strip and separate of New York and separate of, you know. What's interesting about Jane's and Warner's, they were talking and they wanted us on Sire, because Sire had REM, Ramones, Pretenders. They had a better built marketing and radio team, promotional team, built for our type of music in a sense. But we wanted to be on Warner Brothers and make them work for it. And they had Doobie Brothers, Van Morrison, Devo, Van Halen.
Devo, yeah.
And they had some great ass bands, but they didn't have the marketing team that Sire had, which is a college machine, college driven radio. But we wanted to break over that. So, you know, and me and Dave, we could reference the same music, and Perry and Eric could, and soon we all could reference each other's record collections and friends. But at the beginning of the band, we were all separate entities and had different record collections. And, you know, I grew up loving jazz drummers. Navarro grew up loving, guitar players from anywhere from a classical, nylon long fingernail picker, to a metal player, to Yngwie Malmsteen. But some of the guys we would reference, Perry and Eric, didn't even have any idea. They had no idea. Oh, Electric Funeral? I'm not sure what you guys are talking about. The Sabbath tune. No. So that was good for the band. It was good for the mix. So, and then when punk rock, to me, hanging out with Mike Watt and getting a lesson about the germs and getting a lesson about, getting in the van and what it took to leave LA and bring a punk rock band across the country, and the different types of real punk rock attitude. It was strained in the Jane's Addiction early world, but a lot other things were as well. It was a really great potpourri of stuff,
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think that's the thing about that, that glam metal scene that you talked about getting involved with Dave really early on. And through doing this show, I've come to realize like how much of that was kind of an outgrowth of the original punk explosion, like Van Halen playing with early punk bands, or the fact that like there's all these different people that wind up doing, all these various metal bands later on, but they were all playing in like early power pop or punk or kind of new wave bands in the very beginning.
Well, it's so true. And, when you think about what you can get your hands on as far as musicians and friends and who are they and the caliber of musicians that they are. Before I met Navarro, I was usually the guy that could play more songs than anybody in my room. I couldn't find a guitar player, a bass player that knew all the tunes. I was obsessed. I met Navarro. We had similar. Oh, you know that? I know that. You can play that. I can play that. Oh, let's go learn this together. And we were like down for this partnership and crime to go find out how to play every tune from Rush to Zeppelin to Django Reinhardt to whatever we can get our fingers on. Let's figure it out and put it into our arsenal. But I think the LA scene, and also what spawned from New York and of course London with the punk rock attitude. And it's not about technique, though it's fine to have it. And it's not about, having music theory in your back pocket, though that doesn't hurt. It's about attitude. It's about having reflection of what's around you in the times. And that was great when we met Perry, because me and Navarro, being 16, 17, most of the music we heard, especially music we were making, didn't have real poetry connected to it. And so I wrote the lyrics for our early metal bands, and they were pretty silly, but they got us through. Mm-hmm. But when I met, Perry, and I'm reading Pigs and Zen, or reading, Stop, and reading the tunes and reading and getting the, what my, I guess, interpretation, and then getting the actual poet's meaning and talking to him about it and going, okay, lyrics. And that helped write the song, because he wouldn't here's a lyric where I do verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, out. No, here's something I say 3 times about my mom. Then I do this 5 times about my ex-girlfriend. And then I talk about, hunting and eating and gathering for like 10 lines.
Yeah.
And then, it's never a chorus. And it's like, okay, so we write music around this. And this can now embrace the new type of songwriting formula, which is just to tell a story. And then in the meantime, me and Dave were bursting to play, something eventful in a firework somewhere. And Eric saying, no, keep it tame, keep it calm, don't go anywhere. And everybody fighting against this, it's like Taffy pulling Taffy. It was a fucking great moment, so it was needed. And also meeting Flea and Anthony, and meeting Slash, and meeting Duff, and most of these guys were years older than me at the time. They all embraced us, and they were like, you guys are fucking cool. What's next? What are you guys working on? It was competitive, but it wasn't like, no, there was room for everybody. It seemed the pool was deep enough for people to go swimming,
Well, it's like you and Nirvana are always said to be the bands that killed the glam scene, but it's really like, I don't know, it's much more interconnected than these sort of separate scenes when you really start to look at it and really start to kind of examine how, because it's an ecosystem.
Absolutely, man. The band before Pearl Jam, where Andrew Wood passed away, and they had a full band, it was very glamorous.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There was a great, and then they stripped it down because emotionally they had to get away from what happened, but it had to be reborn. But I think about early Janes. If the guy had a Metallica poster and a Cure poster, that's a Janes fan.
Mm-hmm.
If the guy had a poster of Susie and a poster of some kind of heavy rock, that it wasn't dressed up rock, and there was something there, some kind of attitude. There was a Motorhead and, something like that. There was our fan. And our very first agent, who lasted many years, Mark Geiger, got us on the tour with Iggy, 35 shows opening for the Iggy crowd. Perfect. And then 30 shows opening for Love and Rockets. The Love and Rockets crowd. Perfect. And then we did the Psychedelic Furs. And then we did X. And we never played with Aerosmith or Motley or Van Halen. We never went there. We played with these bands that really had some Echo and Peter Murphy and, just fucking cool bands. Lollapalooza, of course, was Susie and Body Count and Henry Rollins. So we just kept it real the whole time and never chased that fraudulent, you dress it up and you see what people buy. We were looking for real art to surround ourselves with.
Well, I think it's really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I mean, cut you off.
No. And it was great to see that Flea and Anthony and the guys in the Fishbone Cats, Norwood and Fish, and everybody's still doing it. And they're such fucking high powerful, high caliber musicians. It's like, whoa, look at this shit, man.
Yeah, I find it interesting to look at, obviously there's a very storied history of Black Flag and DOA kind of building this network of touring for all, alternative bands, or not alternative, but punk bands, what have you. And then it's almost like the bands that you mentioned, Fishbone, Red Hot Chili Peppers, yourselves, that wave of bands are almost like the ones that are like, okay, well, we want to take it to the next level. Like you said before, these bands kind of hit a point where everything was kind of stagnating and there was the glam path, but you guys are kind of, building your own scene. Of course you're having to play with all these different bands because there's no such thing as alternative at that time.
Absolutely. But you know what's true, man? You hit the ceiling. X wasn't going to get bigger. We didn't think Chili Peppers or Fishbone was going to get bigger. We didn't think, we thought the punk, the Circle Jerks and Flag and Dead Kennedys, that was it. They peaked. I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't good. This is just what's happened. Fear got on SNL, and that was about, that was it. They're not going to see much more punk rock anywhere else. So the post-punk thing, it was just stirring in its own stew, which was wonderful and tasty, but it wasn't going to grow. And I remember when X got a tune in a movie with Charlie Sheen about baseball. It was weird. Not that it didn't belong there, but I was like, what the heck? X has got a song in a big movie. That's so weird. What the? So it was like they broke their ceiling. So we did want to break it. That's why we did go to Warner's and not Sire. And we didn't want to just kind of go sideways. We wanted to go up. And and I really feel that was the quest of spreading weirdness around the world more than the quest of money. It was just like, tell the world how fucking weird we are and show them that the lyrics and the musicianship can fucking be, fine tuned and edit the fat and get to the, I always thought in the best that Jane's Addiction could be was like the Iggy Pop meets, Rush. You know what I mean? These guys could play,
Yeah.
and the dude's fucking just saying something on his heart and rolling around in the fucking dirt because he means it. And I Want to Be Your Dog is 18 words, 15 words total. But I mean, it gets you there. And so, Had a Dad has got that same effect. And when Perry told me Had a Dad was about God and it wasn't about his dad, and I was like, oh, 17 going, Had a Dad, big and strong, turn around. Now he's gone. It's about God. Oh, it's fucking brilliant. Then I can play it differently. Then I'm a drummer that has something to grab onto.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? That's what punk rock meant to me, was the lyrics drove you. The scene was hungry and everything is just like, gobble it up, and just fucking, and, even if it has to be regurgitated or replicated or recited night after night on tour, like you said, you go take it on tour, you fucking mean it every night, and you're not a fraud, and that's, I mean, Jane's Addiction never had a great work ethic, or Porno, because we've got issues, but the issues, when we do get on stage, at least they get fried out in front of people, and they're exciting shows. We don't do 1,000, we do 100, and that's what you get. But it's because the friendships, it has to be, we can't just take the money and run. We have to do it for the right reason, because we love to play in front of people. But anyhow, the punk rock attitude of making your own shirts and silk screening on the corner and giving, and doing your own thing and making your own record at the Roxy, and all that stuff is so important to the sound of the music and the way the music was, from first rehearsal to the last time we've played it, whatever, 2 years ago on stage. It always has to have that. Do it from this point for the real reason. I mean, if, coming down the mountain, I mean, it's 1,000 times we've played it. So what does it mean? It's a fucking voodoo. When you hear that bass line, there's voodoo. It's a fucking voodoo bass line. You're like, holy shit, this dude writes bass lines like I've never heard. They're so simple, but they're so fucking catchy, and like, whoa, man, that's like some stirring shit beneath the earth.
Yeah.
And so, let's not fake it, man. Let's fucking be right there, and really just fucking hand them the reason we wrote it. Let's keep that in mind.
Well, it's almost like that, Darby Crash authenticity, poetry, inner suffering mixed with that kind of like, rock and roll commitment to showmanship, like Van Halen putting on a show for the audience.
That's absolutely true. Good point. If you can marry the two great LA bands like that and come up with Jane's Addiction, I'd be fucking loving it. I mean, it's not that, the Doors, even though they're drenched with the blues, and more than that, they're a fucking crystal clear, influential, visionary band with lyrics meets music, where it all seems like it was united from birth. I mean, they were meant to be together. And Jane's Addiction has moments like that. I think my favorite moment for Jane's is a song Ben She Did, where it seems like the Doors, where the music and the lyrics were just mended at, and it's the Lord of the Rings in the fucking Middle Earth. You know what I mean? And there it is. And that's how it's like, whoa, we didn't have to work on that song. It just became that song. And so those are the great, that's when you pass the punk rock moment, when they're like, we are now, I mean, in my opinion, that moment, it feels like we've, melted the metals together, and we've now become this new sword of different types of metals. It's like together we are stronger than separate. And, that in a band. I mean, you hear the strength of unity and chemistry. So that's what I guess what I'm saying. The chemistry got so really heated up for that song for me. Maybe for Navarro, another song, you never know. But
do you remember the first time you ever heard the word punk or came across it?
Yeah, I mean, it was in a graphics type of sense, because me being 54 coming up in the 70s, I would see older kids notebooks.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in 7th grade, I would see the notebooks of 10th and 9th, 9th, 10th, 11th graders. So you did start to see these graphics before you even heard the music, the Sex Pistols, punk rock, anarchy, even fucking the fashion of simple things that they were taking from, England, even a little bit from New York, which was a little more leather, motorcycle boy, but with the English, version of the safety pins and the ripped up clothes. And you started to see this appear, and the word punk kind of become this graphic stamp of something that was not tame, never pedestrian, unmatchable in the sense you couldn't put it in a category. These are just images and feelings I had as a 12-year-old or 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck? It was never written cleanly. It was always splattered. And then you started seeing the Clash's, jackets were always, actually done with a spray paint and maybe a silk screen or something. And so I started to see the image before I heard the sound. And then to discover the Pistols and the Ramones and even the Clash, it didn't seem as dangerous as I expected. Yeah. It seemed very authentic with attitude, and didn't really understand how the lyrics from the Clash differed from the Pistols, etc. Because I didn't know yet. I didn't go and read it. I didn't explore the history of who was writing the lyrics and why and where they came from, and understanding the WW2 ruined England, and they hadn't recovered in the 70s already. I was like, come on, you're fucking kidding me, So yeah, you start to see that volcano of pressure go into the music, and I then to explore what I thought was the most incredible musicians in punk rock were Fear and Bad Brains. And those are the two bands to me that were like, as at least a 16, 17-year-old, like, how do you fucking play that good? And that crystal, that pure, that never purified, but never sterilized, but almost sterilized to the point where it's like, there's nothing but the music and the way you play it. That's all that's left. That's all you got.
Yeah.
And I never saw footage of Bad Brains until later. I did see them, but then you see footage of the early shit. You're like, what the fuck is going on? And the shit Fear would do. And then to find out Flea did some Fear stuff. And I got to speak with him about it. And those two bands for me were just like, that's execution right there.
Yeah.
And that's what that was exciting. And then the influence of the Jamaican and the ska and the dub and everything that Brains was doing, that was never fraudulent. It was always authentic. It was never a fucking band faking it. And James would take that. Our attitude was like the song Ted Just Admit It, which starts off with the dub reggae and ends up with the frantic violent. That was our Bad Brains, like wannabe, like in my opinion,
Yeah.
Let's get dub. Let's give him a grabbing hooky fucking riff and then go fucking nuts at the end. And those, but to me, if I put a Fear or a Brains record on, it still does what it did to me back in the day. And I mean, same with the early, what I thought I needed to go to buy. Wasn't sure what was good or bad. I just knew the names of punk rock bands, and then you explore it, and I guess that's also like record covers. You start looking at record covers and you don't even know what the music is. And that was cool. That was kind of whatever, I guess, a sense of mystery that you don't even know what you're getting, except for the artwork,
Yeah. It's funny you brought up Fear and Bad Brains, because they're, to me, obviously two of the best bands of the era, but such a study in contrast where like the Bad Brains are very much like organically finding this stuff and building their sound. And then, when Keith Morris was on the show, he talks about how Fear was like very much a studied approach to making this music. Like these were older guys that could play. Yeah,
absolutely. Good point. Well, that's important, I guess, for me to know this, because listening to it, it does seem not like a seed to the grown blossom tree,
mm-hmm.
but in a sense, it is. The seed is Bad Brains of just organic, fucking leave it. Just, every recording to me is great, but I love the ROI, the Roar sessions.
Oh, recording. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the one that just does it for me more and more than any other. And when they got a little bit shiny and polished, it wasn't a dislike, and the tempos were slower. It was just new. It was different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Black Dots is still fucking fun because it's like, whoa, that's where that shit was when it fucking was born.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Fucking tempos and shit and punchy. But with the fear stuff, it was like this execution of geometry with like, like the precision and the sense of humor, but also the seriousness of the lyrics, always fucking cutting right to the bone immediately, every word, but always with a fucking funny little like tweak to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not unbelievably exciting to hear that kind of music come off a fucking record.
Well, I mean, I think those two bands really reflect kind of the range in punk rock where you have, the Fears singing like these songs that are just like kind of comedically over the top nihilistic, whereas the Bad Brains are very much like empowerment, youth empowerment, PMA, they coined this whole thing. And it's like, this is where punk is, where you get these two kind of like competing ideologies of nihilism for the sake of nihilism and positivity above all else kind of coming head on together and creating a scene.
Well, that's true. And, the Jamaican, I guess thread, when you think about Peter Tosh and his lyrics, Get Up, Stand Up, and it was about fight back. And then you think about Marley, it was about loving and forgiving. But they were in the same band. So it's kind of the same thing. Even you got these people and these sounds that are doing different things and wanting different outcomes. But in the meantime, they're using their instrument as the weapon, But it's a great experience to put on punk rock for someone who's never heard Fear or the Brains, and just be like, oh, I mean, it's rare, but you find it, and then you just fucking go, what is this fucking shit? It's alive. It's like, it's a shark.
Yeah.
And then that's what I think is so great about the attitude that you mentioned, like that positive empowerment that Brain spoke of. And then, of course, to feel like let's have a war, and to understand those lyrics to actually, like, I live in a great safe place. My parents, stayed together for 50 years, never divorced. The family's life is good. Let's have a war. Fuck yeah. I'm fucking down. I get it, man. I mean, let's just get rid of everybody, and I'm fucking down with that. And so it brought out great feelings, and it made me pursue better, I guess, a better promise to myself on how to be a drummer. Because if you think about, what Earl and Spit, what they left on the records were like, can you match that? No, well, fuck you. And I love that. I mean, you can't match it. It's just a fucking wow. Are you playing for the song? Are you playing for your ego? Are you playing for drum sounds, man? You listen to these two fucking guys. That's how you do it. That's how you take a hold of a song, drive it like a car, and also be musical, very musical.
It's also like weirdly, they're both uncoverable bands, like, because you can never capture what those two bands had.
That's so true. You don't hear that very often. But,
yeah, like it's so unique, like the vocals and like obviously the musicianship's on a next level with both of them, but they're like, no one's ever going to be able to fear better than Fear, or Bad Brains better than the Bad Brains or Bad Brains.
Yeah, I guess that would be a badass experience, though, to have them play each other's music.
That would be wild.
It's the only thing we can think of, guys. You guys do the Fear record, you do the Roy sessions, and let's go see what happens. But I appreciate the fact that I'm in my 50s, so they got to be in their 60s, and you fucking know they're the same people that gave you that music. They haven't changed, man, and that's what I love about musicianship. I mean, even an athlete, you're gonna have to hang up your glove and your mitt and your cleats one day. But musicians don't have to hang it up. Yeah, we can slow the tempos or drop the key, but we don't have to hang it up, and we can keep rolling. And I just love that these punkers or early fucking skaters or early fucking graffiti artists, they're still with us, and they're just like, who can match that attitude? I mean, come on.
But it's the only actually. But that being said, the lead singer and the drummer are the two positions in the band where there actually is like a physical toll, like there would be on an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. So as soon as your health suffers, your performance suffers if you're a singer or a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, if your fingers are hurt and you can't guitar the way you used to, but you can still plug in and get the volume and use the same distortion pedal.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like the volume and the tone doesn't change if you feel like shit. But as a drummer or a singer, if you don't got it, that's noticeable. So my quest, and I'm on it like a motherfucker now that I'm like, 54 around the corner, and the North America is lifting out of this fog, and we're gonna get back to work. I just want to be a fucking extreme drummer where I can think of something and play it, but not get in the way of the song. But if I want to try something, I want to be able to fucking pull it off and not let the ankles or the wrists or the neck or the back, whatever might interfere.
Yeah.
And so I have this great athletic endurance stamina quest in me right now, and it's been healthy. It's healthy for me, and I can't wait to share it with the world this summer when Jane starts playing again in September.
It's interesting. I watched this interview with you, and you brought up this point about how as you get older as a drummer, you learn how to use your skills better. Like you learn where to apply them, I should say. Like I think I don't want to misquote you, but you talked about you learn where to put the speed and where to put these different elements that you pick up. And I find it, I'm obviously, well, not obviously, I'm also a massive fan of pro wrestling, and I find
Oh, cool.
when you talk to these pro wrestlers, especially the older guys, they talk about the fact that as you get older as a pro wrestler, you get better because you learn to do more by doing less. And I think that with singers and drummers, that's also something where as you get better at your craft, you learn how to apply these things to greater effect. Like you said.
Yeah, I mean, as far as songwriting, you never want to lose that naive, courageous, break ground just for the sake of it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Why you always want to think. I do. The day before Jackson Pollock threw paint, he was using a brush like everybody else.
Yeah.
So there was a moment he just fucking went crazy, threw it, and then everything went that direction forever. So I'm always trying to throw the paint. What did I do yesterday? I worked my whole life to get as good as I did yesterday. What's next? How do I throw the paint, not just use a brush like everyone else? What's going to make me different? Mm-hmm. But I don't want to be, sticking out like a sore thumb. I'm here to serve the tune. Like Ringo told you, make the song sound good. But there's like this quest I have as a drummer for my posture, my body, my neck. So right now, for the last 14 months, like everybody else, you can do whatever you want with your time, but you have a lot of it. So I spent a lot of time getting to know my rudiments and bouncing off the snare drum and learning how to bounce off a surface in this very, I guess, tipping my hat in a romantic way to the great drummers that use the same rudiments that I do. Elvin Jones and Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and Ian Pace and Bonham. It's the same book, the rudiment book. So I started playing the snare drum and the rudiments going, these are the same fucking rudiments that Steve Gadd did and Jeff Porcaro. And so I got into this weird, like, spiritual, like, surfing wave. I'm on the wave with the greats. This is how they practice. But now I'm thinking, I have a mirror set up and I'm looking at my body. And I'm thinking, I want to sit up straight. I want my shoulders. I don't want higher right shoulder, lower left shoulder while I play. So I'm starting to look at my posture. So this last 13, 14 months has been a real wake up for awareness of stick control, posture. The creative side is bursting, but I'm happy I had it. I never would have taken the look at my posture or the bouncing of the stick. I just would be gigging.
Yeah.
So it hasn't interfered. It's only increased my love of drumming. It hasn't really slowed or staggered or gone sideways as far as the creative side. It's gone up because there's just a new understanding of what my body is now 54 and what it's going to do for the next 50 years until I'm 104. I'm still fucking playing drums. Oh, I'm happy I looked at my posture. God damn it.
It's funny. Just going back to what you said something earlier where you're talking about, the fact that there's Fishbone, yourselves, and Red Hot Chili Peppers, and sort of this fun scene, like a lot of major chords and a lot more joyous. And I find it fascinating, like having conversations with people that were around Los Angeles around that time that talk about the violence in the punk scene and just how heavy shit had gotten in punk. And it's almost like this new scene that you guys were ushering in is like a reaction to that. Like very much in the same way with DC, you have Minor Threat become Fugazi at a certain point because the violence becomes too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's true. I mean, the suicidal tendency story and some of the shit that was going on. I'm sure there was a lot of external and internal violence happening that wasn't, even part of the beauty of what the music made you feel, but it was a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely has. When you think about the Chili's and Fishbone, there's just this great love affair of like jumping on each other and dancing and hopping and in together sequence and motion, and Jerry Garcia said it, and I've always talked about this. He flew into Woodstock in '67 or whatever, '69, and said, "My God, you haven't seen this many people in one place unless it's a battlefield or unless the fucking Germans are showing off their army. When do you see this many people? It's a fucking music festival, and it gets people together to dance. They have common interests, man. They want to get loose and get away and get back." And I think that was what I got out of the late night LA punk scene was a lot of, especially with Mike Watt and Flea and Anthony and the Cats and Fishbone. I'm still friends with these guys. Yeah. They were open heart, open arms, loving, interested in what we had to offer artistically, never fucking shut us out. Me and Navarro, we were the young ones. And we felt, Navarro ended up in the Chili's and Flea ended up with Flea ended up with Jane's in '97. We played on each other's records, and it's just a really great, in a sense, like you said, a flashback from the violence. And of course there was too much drugs and people lost friends and musicians and bands had, cracked up. But that goes on, if you're a dentist or if you're a fucking school teacher, it happens. It's not rock and roll. It's not downtown LA, though it helped. But, so there was this great love affair between band members and other bands. Now, Jane's one of our first rehearsal places that was kind of fancy in our idea, because most of them were pretty low key. We shared with Guns N' Roses, Fishbone, Bullet Boys, and Jane's Addiction. And everybody put their gear in the corner. And the band, Bullet Boys would get Monday and Wednesday. Jane's would get Tuesday and Thursday and whatever. And we switched that up. Everyone had gigs Friday and Saturday. You load back in Sunday. And it was Lillian Way, Santa Monica and Vine. So there was 4 bands from different places, different labels, and different fans and different record collections. And we all shared the same rehearsal place and fucking, hey, what's up? Nice to see you. Never a fucking issue, because we weren't competing for fans, man. We had a different scene, but it was a good scene of musicians. And right around the corner was an Army surplus place. So we'd all go there for our boots and our fucking, dog collar spikes, funny shit. And, and that was the attitude, that it was fun to be a peacock and show off colors. And as long as you had a great state, if you were good on stage, otherwise, that we don't need to speak about why you dressing up. But I think that the thing with punk rock, when I got a chance to hang out a little bit with John Doe and Exene and more DJ Bonebreak, the drummer, of course, drummers hang, but that's, but hanging out with Exene and John, that was a little foreign to me. And a little bit with Billy Zoom, he came and went, but their punk rock had this, I fucking thought they were the coolest punk band because there was just nothing polished, but it was just so fucking sawdust and jeans, but it was still punk rock. But they taught me a lot because I got to play with them a few times, and they're like, just get to the fucking point. Don't do things 4 things. Why do a part 4 times? Because that's what you think the formula is. Do it 3 times. Why do this for that? Why do you just go punk rock? Shave something, change something. Do it. Everybody does it this way. Do it 1 more. Do it 1 less. Fucking throw a wrench in it. And that's, they were just teaching me just simple punk rock attitude that was like in songwriting, don't do this 4 times. Let's just do it 3 times, man. People will be like, whoa, that changed quick. Yeah. Fuck yeah. We don't need 4 of those. Dance, 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 dun, 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 on to something else. And it was just cool to talk to someone that was 10, 15 years older, that was never showing off. Like me and Dave knew every inch of Iron Maiden or a Deep Purple record where there were solos forever.
Yeah, like it's amazing you bring up X there too, because I kind of think they're they're like one of the bands, and John talked about this when he was on the show, and I've seen him talk about it in documentaries. They're one of the bands that fled the punk scene and were
Yeah, yeah.
kind of driven out by the violence. It seems like, and well, it doesn't even seem. He says, and so they're it seems like actively looking for what's next at the same time that you guys are all showing up and kind of being like, well, this is going to be next.
Well, it was interesting because Perry, to me, making jewelry and writing poems and dressing in a more fantastic fantasy world than anything heavy rock would be giving you on Sunset Strip. It was this, before the late, before the sun came up. Those are the kind of looks that you would see, and that's what I think, embracing not only the clothes and the look, but the feeling that when you put on a suit, the way you walk, when you put on a bathing suit, the way you walk, you walk different when you dress different. And there was something cool about embracing these new colors and these new feelings of like fabric and bracelets and things in your hair and all these, embrace all these new, I guess, in a sense, ways to stimulate, creativity, but never emulate, what you've heard and seen, never reference that great drum beat from John Bonham and then try to do it. Just be something fresh and new. And, I learning that, like listening to an X record, it always sounded fresh and new. Listening to a Minutemen record, it always sounded like they were onto something, and then they'd stop and they would never even repeat it. The next song was different sounding and a completely different type of attitude. And so there was such a great awareness as a drummer. I was in fucking crazy about jazz drummers as a kid, but I couldn't find anybody that played saxophone or piano even. Hey, everybody played, bass, Ampeg bass, Marshall Stack guitar. And so I had to learn, which I love, but I had to learn drumming in the more macho, aggressive volume, then less sensitivity, using brushes and using upright bass and a piano and exploring more quiet, dynamics up and down. So once I had more muscle, I still wanted to swing like Mitch Mitchell or Bill Ward from Sabbath or Ringo or Charlie. Just you're swinging back there, but you're also playing with a bunch of punch. So after a while, not playing jazz, I'm just playing rock with a jazz feel. I started to gobble up East Indian tabla and Ravi Shankar sitar duets, and African records with Babatunde Olatunji, tribal 45 drums of passion, or Fela Kuti, and start gathering up these new rhythms. Even Henry was great. Rollins was turning me on to, I already knew about the go-go scene from DC, but Henry gave me some trouble funk records and some interesting DC remixes that totally stimulated my drum ideas. So I started gobbling up all this shit that was like, cool. I love the AC/DC. I love Van Halen. Great. I love Echo. I love Susie. But what would Babatunde Olatunji do with this guitar riff?
Yeah.
And I started really imprinting and using the blueprint of everything that I could rhythmically that was maybe out of place, out of left field, didn't belong, and impregnating those drum ideas. And Perry and Dave and Eric were completely open arms and welcome to that. And I think the whole attitude now in the Gang of Four or Susie or even fucking early Adam and the Ants and Bow Wow Wow, those tribal rhythms, those African, Burundi beat, I just fucking foam up for. I love it. And it's just, The Cure was using it a little bit on the Pornography record. So that was a great, everyone was open arms to all that shit. I don't know if you'd find that in a rock, straight up, rock and roll scene,
I was going to ask, what about a band like Savage Republic? Did you guys have any interaction with them? Because they seem like obviously doing something sonically different than you're doing and a lot more close, I guess, to Psycom, but like, once again, trying to incorporate other influences than just that, as you said, macho rock and roll thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely recall, I don't think we ever did shows with, but I mean, there was this quest to find some unusual, noisemakers making noise with their toys. And I remember when porno started and the Flaming Lips came out of Oklahoma, it was so refreshing to find this very
you know, in a sense, there's a lot of, it's a rainbow of sound and you know, color coming out of a band, but still weird, gutsy, you know, the psychedelic journey. And I really thought the Lips, they still do, but those early Lips moments were like unbelievably, they enlightened me on what is possible. Hopefully that's what Jane's or Porno did to other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt that with when Lips first showed up, and it was really a jazz moment, you know, when things were blending and changing.
Another band that I kind of think, like, you know, obviously once again sonically very different, but also like this really free approach and certainly a live show and a big influence on the Flaming Lips, like the Butthole Surfers.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. We did many nights with the Surfers, and the truth is, their quest, like Sonic Youth, for exploration and what the impression and the ripple effect of those vibrations do to people in their show. I mean, it's a remarkable experience. It's a sweat tent. It's a journey. It's a real never replicated night after night. Even though if you're, you know, maybe just didn't understand what was happening, it might sound exactly the same as it did the night before. But you know they're on some quest and they're looking to. It's almost like going into a cave in the pitch black and carving art. They go in there and they see something. They don't even need light. They just go in, and then if you go in tomorrow and then light what they wrote, it's a beautiful picture. It's like they go into the dark. And I mean, I love that about drums because we enter a silent room and we pierce the silence. It's violent. It's not brushing. You could use mallets and brushes, but most drumming is piercing the silence with a stick and a cymbal or a head or a pedal. And you have to choose where you're going to break the silence and then break it again over and over to make a rhythm. And you have to leave silence. And then the room is just being beaten up with your vibration. Now you come in with a violin or a guitar, acoustic guitar, and you can blend into the room and not vibrate the room and not violently attack it. The silent visual waves that a drum makes, the static, the little zigzag. Mm-hmm. So I always think, what's the drummer? He's got to take this violent, confident approach to laying down a beat. Come in there, and just fucking lay it down over and over to where it feels like it makes sense to people. You know, why? Why do you do? What are you doing? It's such a weird instrument, and any instrument really just goes out there and just floats away. There's nothing you can grab onto. Even a recording is magnetic, or even now digital, zeros and ones. But the drum itself or the voice is just this authentic expression of breaking the silence. And it's almost like when you put a nail in a wall, and the first time it goes in just perfect, and you hang that picture, and it's not crooked, and it's the right height. Or you put a nail in the wall and it didn't go on right, it's crooked and you got to pull it out. Or you put the fucking picture up, it's too high, you got to pull the hole out. There's 3 holes back there. That's a mess. Drumming is about hitting it just once and just bam, it's in. And then doing that 10,000 times in one song. It's perfectly in at the perfect time, perfect height. But that, ba-doom, ba-damn, you're just putting in nails on a wall. And that wall is silence. That wall is a canvas of quietness, and you're puncturing it with these nails, and it's a beat and it's a pattern, and then it's a frenzied emotional moment, drum fill, whatever, a reaction. So I always think of the drummer has this great opportunity but responsibility to gobble up the airwaves with these violent punctures, you know. And how do you do it? What makes you, the guy from Queen, Roger Taylor, sound different from the guy from, you know, The Cure, you know, who's doing this or that. So I just love hearing and knowing what drummers do in the punk rock scene. And I, you know, 80s rock and roll drummers in the Strip and around the country. To me, Tommy Lee was like the man on the top of the mountain in 85, but so many people just wanted to be meat and potatoes like Tommy. Mm-hmm. And he was just the guy that laid it down. If you wanted to play that kind of beat, then Tommy was the man. And then, you know, but after Jane's, whatever Jane's did influence, or me, or if it wasn't me, but there were so many great drummers with he had, Tim from Primus, Matt from Soundgarden, Pearl Jam had many of the drummers, Dave Aberzees and other cats, Sean Kenny, or fucking Dave Grohl, I mean, Jimmy from the Pumpkins, Danny from Tool, Brad from Rage, Adrian from No Doubt, and then into Blink 182 with Mr. Barker. I mean, the drummers I think were really hitting the ceiling after Tommy Lee, but after Jane's, it was a really great explosion of expression with drumming and different drummers sounding differently. And I love that. If I don't know if Jane's was that influence, but I love knowing that there was a moment after Jane's where drums became more, in a sense, expressive and adventurous.
Oh yeah, that's it's not just obviously the drumming, but it's also just everything. Like there's that moment in like 1991 where Lollapalooza's happening. You've got yourselves, Gibby's playing the shotgun on the stage. Like it really feels like that was the moment where all this cool, crazy shit that had been happening underground was just brought to the masses, and that effect we're still living through. Like there's people that are still being affected by all that brought with it.
No, absolutely. And that was the moment, of course, when alternative became something that they can, put a stamp on and sell. Now it was a category. It was something, but it was a great moment to see 7 bands touring across the fucking country from here to Jersey and back, and 30,000 people just going and knowing every word of a Butthole Surfer song. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, no, definitely a very incredible time. I've kept you for a long time, and I could talk to you forever. At some point in the future, would you come back for a part 2?
That's 100% yes.
But before you go, can I ask you a couple more questions?
Of course.
Well, one thing I got to talk to you about is Infectious Grooves, because to me, that's almost like the LA supergroup coming together. You've got Wasted Youth, you've got Excel, you've got obviously Suicidal Tendencies and Jane's Addiction, all kind of coming together. Did it feel like did you know all those guys prior to, like, obviously I guess you did, but like, were those bands interacting with each other, or is this really where it all kind of comes together?
Well, it's a great story. First of all, the Suicidal guys did at least 20 shows with Jane's in 1990. So I became tight with Robert and Mike.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me to come and play on their new record, Infectious Grooves, separate than Suicidal, more metal, funk, rap infusion. I played 3 or 4 songs, played percussion on the whole record, hung out for about, 6-10 nights, and then fucking went back on Jane's Addiction tour. The last show in Hawaii, Who Shows Up with Rob and Mike, I get off stage, my heart is broken. And they're like, Infectious Grooves put out the record, Ozzy's on a song called Therapy. Ozzy and Sharon invited Infectious to do 40 shows on the No More Tears tour. I'm like, I just broke up with Jane's Addiction 45 seconds ago. This is great news. I'm in. I just joined Jane's. I fucking broke up with Jane's Addiction and just joined Infectious in the same afternoon. So they saved me from my heart breaking and me just going into the spiral, whatever it would have been. We don't know. But I was back on tour 3 weeks later with Robert and Mike, which were, now years or 2 in my life. And the other cats were at the session when I did the drumming, take 6 months earlier. So I had friends, but they weren't much of more than that, of just like doing the session and knowing their history.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got on a tour bus and went on tour and did the Ozzy tour, which had, Mike Inez, who's now the bass player for Alice in Chains. He was the bass player for Ozzy. Of course, Zach Wilde was on guitar, and he was young and just starting. And this great drummer that passed away, Randy Castillo, was Ozzy's drummer. So Ozzy had a great band. I'm still friends with the cats, minus, of course, rest in peace, Randy. But so that was the Infectious. And then, we got some unusual offers, and they were managed by Q Prime, who does the Chili Peppers and Metallica and Suicidal. And Q Prime gets a lot of offers on their desk. So they were offered Encino Man with Pauly Shore. And so we did it. And, I kind of regretted it during the moment, but then, halfway through I was having a great time. And now looking back, I'm happy I did it. But it was like, unusual after Jane's to be on a set with Infectious and Pauly Shore and friends. But Paulie's a good guy, and it would turn out to be a blast altogether. But the Infectious experience was great because I also opening for Ozzy and making new friends, and also meeting new young metal people that were separate of the Janes. Everything I grew up with Janes. These are some new cats. I'm all hanging out with Zach Wild from Ozzy, and all the cats that are coming to see Ozzy on a nightly basis. And then later on, joining up with Tommy Lee's band, Methods of Mayhem, we toured with Pantera and the Deftones and Slipknot. And
those tours must have been insane, like even compared to Jane's Addiction.
Well, yeah, it was nuts, and it was cool to be able to get to know a new generation of great musicians, authentic fucking do-it-yourselfers, and really hungry guys that want to do it nightly like I did and do. And so it was cool because it wasn't, Anthony and then Mike Watt and these cats that I've been working with and knowing their quality and they're good brothers. But it was this new group of cats, and it was cool. So but the Infectious, to me was this wonderful, ahead of its time hybrid of rap and metal, and also really great ass players that cared about, like what me and Dave did at the beginning of Jane's, showing off a little bit, but never getting in the way of the song. But, showing that you did your fucking homework and you got technique. I love that, if it doesn't hurt anything,
I can't imagine a more studying contrast to go from working with, someone like Mike Watt to go into working with, on a tour like the one you're describing with Methods of Mayhem. Like, Mike Watt is the saltiest of the salt earth. I don't mean that in a salty way. I mean, like, he is the salt of the earth human being.
Absolutely. And that's what's great about music, and also young and old, and anybody who comes from anywhere and any fucking color. We're here to make music. We're students of music. We're students of it. We don't play it. We're learning it. We don't master it. It's fucking Jeff Beck is the best, and the rest of us are just fucking, nothing. I mean, that's that. It's just fuck. But it's incredible because I really do believe, I was a shy kid, but with music and drumming, I can talk all night with people. I was, hyper in the sense that I know what to do with myself, and the drums give me that outlet, and it's pure. And I think the attitude of punk rock is, if you're lucky enough to find an instrument that does that for you, and yeah, sure, there's nothing wrong with studying music and music theory and learning about the greats and the history of it, but it is about being yourself. And I love being, that's, I think, the best thing about music is getting to know the people, because their music speaks to you. You never got to meet them. You never really got to hang out with these guys, but you know them through the music because you feel it's a personal relationship with musicians more than art, novels, and movies. It's a personal relationship, and it's really, in the bedroom, in your headphones, in your car. It's very personal. It's when you love your song and in your band. So it's like, that's the punk rock, that Mike Watt likes to do. Because when he's on stage, he's a beast.
Oh yeah.
When he's in the studio, he's this melodic maestro.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, Perk, here, let me show you the bass line right here. It's boop, boop, doo, 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 doo. It's beautiful. I'm like, oh wow, Mike, that's cool. Yeah, it's a little thing about the lyrics, about the basically they've killed all the clams in San Pedro, Perk. So there's no clams. So I mean, these lyrics are about the clam. We got a clam shortage. I'm like, that's sad. I'm like, oh my god, that's fucking sad. I mean, it's like Mike, he's thorough.
Yeah.
And and so that's I get a chance to hang out with Watt and take it to heart, and he takes every word he says and he means it, and you can hold him to it. And then of course, and then get to hang out with the cats and Slipknot and then fucking acid in the back of the bus and go, whoa, you guys are fucking nuts, man, banging on shit and flipping out and but they're not faking it, they're doing it. So
yeah,
I'm honored to have this these opportunities, and
if you fail to prepare to fail, because you don't want to go out and take an opportunity if you're not ready. So I'm trying to stay ready and stay well equipped as a musician, as an athletic musician, and someone who can gather music that sometimes isn't particularly my favorite, but take something out of it and put it in my arsenal so my drumming can morph into something new constantly. And that's a quest. So if I don't like a hip hop record, maybe I should put it on and play to it for 2 weeks and see what it does to my drumming.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of this new generation of, like, minimal hi-hat in this lyric, and that's the whole song. I mean, maybe I should put it on and try to play to it for a week and see what it does to my drumming. Maybe it's gonna fucking, wow, now I'm playing really spacious. I've never thought of it this way. Who knows? So I'm trying to be open-minded and never let the ego or the curiosity go away.
Well, because you wind up playing on, like, in addition to Jane's Addiction, in addition to Porno For Pyros, in addition to all these bands that you're actually in, you also wind up playing on some of the most significant records of that era. That for, like, the Rage Against the Machine record, the No Doubt record, the 9 Inch Nails record, and
that's right. Thank you.
But to me, like, the one record that to me is perhaps greater than all of them, certainly on a personal level, is the Ballhog Tugboat record.
It is a genius piece, and his heart and his, like, quest to cover all bases, and anybody, if he has an idea, he sees it through. And the whole lineup on that record, and that record really started a bunch of, I think, ideas about people collaborating in a rock world separate of how they did before that. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think he opened a door for these beautiful, in a sense, they make sense, but also that's an odd collaboration, but they do make sense. But I think the highlight for the record for me is Carla singing San Pedro, driving up from Pedro. But I was honored to be on that,
Yeah, I think Carla is the unheralded VIP of that record. Like, her vocals make so many songs.
It's unbelievable. And she sang on 3 Days with James, and it didn't make the cut, whatever that means. It was a great night. She came by and sang with Perry.
That's awesome. My middle child's grade 1 teacher plays on the record too.
Oh, what?
Rhonda Rendon plays bass clarinet.
That's cool, dude.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, and then when they toured with Grohl and fucking and Eddie Vedder.
Yep, a huge show for me. That was one of the shows that got me into this music, and, like, that's a show, that's a tour that really puts Foo Fighters out there. Like, that record is almost the beginning of the next chapter of alternative music to me.
I agree, man. It was an amazing piece of work. And the fucking record cover is so, it's just so like, what? It's like, Perk, what do you think about these guys wrestling? That's wonderful, Mike. I really like it. Thank you for doing this with me, and let's do number 2 as soon as we can.
Absolutely.
I love talking with you. It was a lot of fun.
This has been incredible. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, man. Anytime. Have a good night.
Thank you, Steven, for coming on the show. And you heard right there, he had to run. So he will be back for part 2 at some point in the future. Speaking of being in the future, later on this week, my good friends, some of my best friends in the world, Hallucination, will be putting out a new record. The guys that were formerly known as A Tribe Called Red. And I'm talking about Bear Witness and Tim Toolman. And I've wanted to do this conversation with them for a very long time. And we finally get to sit down and talk next week on the show. I'm excited for everyone to hear this one. This is a really fun conversation, and I'm even more excited for you to hear this record. The new record is something really special. And yeah, that is it for today's episode. Remember, as always, Black Lives Matter. The lives of Indigenous people matter. We need to protect trans kids, and we need to help trans people protect themselves. We need to stop hate and violence towards Asian people and just people of different faiths, because this shit's ridiculous. This is not political. This is not a political issue. This is not. It's like getting a vaccine. This isn't a fucking political issue. This is These are just like factual things. This is just human rights issues. So go out, get yourself informed, do what you need to do, volunteer time, volunteer money to causes that you believe in. Just educate yourself on what's going on in the world and get a vaccine. Get a vaccine because, my gosh, I'm going to get to travel this week and I'm very excited to do so. And I think it would be even better if we were all vaccinated because you know what? It's going to happen. We're all going to get there eventually. And I think that's it for no. What am I talking about? I'm cutting myself off way early. I got way more shit to do in this end promo bit. Remember, you can always sign your organ donor cards because by the time they get those organs, you don't need that shit. Just get it out of your body. Do something creative for yourself. Helps make your own culture. Start a band, start a fanzine, start a record label. Hint, hint. But yeah, just go and do something. Try meditating. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe it'll work. And that's it. Stay safe. I'll see you now on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.